They arrived under a pale sky, the train screeching to a halt before the barbed wire fences that enclosed the U.S. Army camps. Men who had marched through shattered towns and blasted forests now shuffled off into a new kind of confinement, their steps heavy with exhaustion and uncertainty. The air was thick with questions, none of which had easy answers. Where would they be sent? What awaited them behind these fences? The war was over, but the fight for their own futures had only just begun. Among the prisoners were soldiers from every corner of Germany, a mosaic of faces etched with fatigue and disbelief. Some were veterans, their eyes hollow from years of combat and loss. They had borne witness to the collapse of everything they had believed in, ideals twisted by propaganda, loyalty shattered by defeat. Others were boys barely out of youth, their hands still unscarred by battle but their spirits already bruised. They clutched at memories of home, of mothers and sisters left behind in ruins, while the cold reality of captivity closed in around them. Rumors had travelled ahead of their arrival, whispered in barracks and mess halls. Some spoke of harsh punishments, starvation diets, and relentless cruelty. Others hinted at strange kindnesses, the odd gesture of humanity from the very people they had been taught to hate. But no one could fully imagine the world they were stepping into, a place that neither matched the horror stories nor the nightmares of retribution. The camps themselves were strange landscapes, a jumble of wooden barracks, watchtowers, and wire fences that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Guards in olive-drab uniforms moved with purposeful ease, their faces a mixture of boredom and professionalism rather than hatred. The prisoners observed them cautiously, their own expressions guarded. The language barrier was thick and silent, yet something unspoken hung between the two groups, a shared acknowledgement of the uncertain road ahead. Settling into the routine was a slow, awkward process. The prisoners were assigned bunks in crowded rooms, their belongings sparse and worn. The barracks echoed with whispered conversations in German, punctuated by the occasional shout from a guard. Life here was a far cry from the battlefields they had known, but it was no less confining. The monotony settled over them like a heavy fog, broken only by the occasional arrival of mail or the distant sounds of activity beyond the fences. As days passed, the prisoners found themselves caught between hope and despair. Letters from home were precious lifelines, though often delayed and censored. They painted pictures of a homeland battered by war, struggling to rebuild even as it mourned. The men wrote back cautiously, careful not to reveal too much lest their words be used against their families. The gulf between their lives and those they had left behind seemed to widen with every passing day. Yet even amid this bleakness, something unexpected began to stir. It came not from orders or official programs but from small moments, glances exchanged over meals, whispered jokes in the dark, the quiet act of sharing a cigarette. These gestures, fragile and fleeting, hinted at a deeper humanity beneath the surface of captivity. Rumors began to circulate about a new activity introduced by the guards, something called baseball. For many, the very idea was foreign, a strange game from a distant land. Some scoffed, dismissing it as trivial, while others were curious, drawn by the promise of distraction from the endless hours of confinement. The guards, for their part, seemed eager to share it, perhaps as a way to fill the long days and ease tensions. The prisoners watched from the sidelines at first, their eyes tracing the arcs of balls flying through the air, the swift movements of players in uniforms that seemed bright and almost surreal against the drab backdrop of the camp. The rules were confusing, the sounds unfamiliar, crack of the bat, cheers, the thud of a ball caught in a glove. Yet beneath the surface, there was a rhythm, a pulse that spoke to something universal. For these men, once soldiers bound by duty and ideology, the game represented a new kind of challenge. It was a puzzle to be solved, a skill to be learned. More than that, it was a bridge, a rare connection to their captors that transcended language and circumstance. In the face of defeat and displacement, baseball offered a fragile thread of normalcy. Night after night, in dimly lit barracks, groups gathered to talk about the game, to piece together its rules from broken English and gestures. Some prisoners fashioned makeshift equipment from scraps, sticks carved into bats, balls crudely bound from rags. The camp became alive with quiet anticipation as more men joined in, their skepticism giving way to cautious enthusiasm. This newfound interest was not without its tensions. Older soldiers, hardened by years of war, viewed the game with suspicion, worried it might distract from the ever-present reality of captivity. Younger men, however, embraced it eagerly, seeing in baseball a chance to reclaim a part of themselves lost to violence and defeat. It was a small rebellion against despair, a way to assert identity when so much had been stripped away. As the days turned into weeks, the game began to shape the rhythms of camp life. It was no longer just a curiosity but a focal point, a reason to rise early, to practice, to compete. The barracks buzzed with talk of players, strategies, and scores. Even the guards took notice, some offering tips, others simply watching with quiet approval. For the prisoners, baseball became more than a pastime. It was an unexpected gift, a crack in the wall of captivity through which hope and dignity could seep. The men found in the game a way to connect, not only with their captors but with each other. Old rivalries faded as teamwork and sportsmanship took root. The uniformity of camp life was broken by the individuality of players, each bringing their own style and spirit to the field. Yet, even as baseball grew in importance, the prisoners never lost sight of the uncertain futures that awaited them. The war had ended, but their personal battles were far from over. Letters from home reminded them of destruction and loss. The news from Europe was grim, filled with rumors of hardship and rebuilding. The camps were temporary, but the scars they carried were not. Still, in the quiet moments before dawn, when the camp was cloaked in shadows and the world seemed suspended, the men would dream, not of battlefields or defeat, but of the diamond under an open sky, of the crack of a bat and the rush of a run. Baseball was no longer just a game. It was a promise of something beyond the fences, a glimpse of redemption in a world turned upside down. In this strange new chapter of their lives, the prisoners began to understand that captivity was not merely a punishment but also an opportunity to rediscover themselves, to build new bonds, and perhaps to find a path forward through a pastime born in a faraway land. It was a beginning unlike any they had known, fragile yet profound, setting the stage for a transformation no one could have predicted. The morning sun spilled over the camp, casting long shadows that stretched across the dusty field where the prisoners had gathered, their eyes fixed on the figures moving with practiced grace in the American Guards' uniforms. Baseball was no longer just a whispered curiosity, it was quickly becoming a fixture of daily life, a language without words that bridged the gulf between captor and captive. Skepticism still lingered among many, but curiosity had begun to take root, pushing aside doubt and fear. The guards, often young men with easy smiles and weathered hands, took on the role of teachers. They approached the prisoners not as enemies but as mentors, patiently demonstrating the mechanics of the game. Fingers pointed to bases, gloves were shown and passed around. The crack of a bat echoed sharply in the crisp air. For the prisoners, it was a bewildering spectacle. Strange rules, unfamiliar equipment, and a pace that seemed both slow and frantic. At first, the Germans watched from the sidelines, their expressions guarded, eyebrows furrowed in concentration as they tried to parse the foreign motions. The concept of baseball was alien, not a sport grown from their own traditions but an imported curiosity from across the ocean. Yet in the guarded exchanges between players and spectators, a new kind of communication blossomed. Gestures replaced words, a nod here, a smile there. The game offered a rare reprieve from the silence and suspicion that had cloaked the camp. Some prisoners were quick to grasp the basics, their athleticism and competitive spirit shining through despite the unfamiliarity. Others struggled, their movements hesitant, their confidence fragile. But even those who faltered found themselves drawn deeper into the rhythms of the game. The simple joy of catching a ball, of running bases, of connecting with teammates, these moments rekindled a spark long dimmed by defeat and captivity. The guards encouraged this enthusiasm, organizing informal drills and demonstrations. They shared stories of great players and famous games, painting vivid pictures of a sport that was more than just pastime. It was a test of skill, strategy, and endurance. The prisoners listened, captivated by tales of crowds roaring in stadiums, of underdog teams triumphing against the odds. In these stories, they glimpsed a world beyond the fences, a world alive with possibility and passion. Language remained a barrier, but baseball spoke in a universal tongue. The prisoners began to mimic the motions, practicing swings and catches with makeshift gloves fashioned from scraps. Laughter, tentative at first, began to ripple through the ranks as mistakes turned into successes. The game was a balm, soothing the wounds of captivity and giving shape to moments that had once been defined by fear and uncertainty. For some, baseball kindled memories of better times, of youth and freedom. For others, it was a revelation, a new challenge to master, a distraction from the tedium and anxiety of prison life. The act of learning, of improving, brought a renewed sense of purpose. The prisoners found themselves setting small goals, to hit the ball farther, to catch more reliably, to understand the elusive rules that governed the game's flow. As the days wore on, the lines between captor and captive blurred on the diamond. The guards and prisoners shared the field, their roles shifting from adversaries to teammates and opponents in a contest governed by fairness and respect. The competitive spirit that had once fueled battle found a new outlet in the friendly rivalries that emerged with each game played. This shared experience began to chip away at the walls built by war and propaganda. The guards saw men who were not faceless enemies but individuals with talent, determination, and humor. The prisoners, in turn, recognized their captors as more than jailers, complex men shaped by their own stories and struggles. Baseball became a mirror reflecting a common humanity. The game's structure offered a rhythm to camp life that was otherwise absent. Practice sessions became gatherings where prisoners and guards exchanged not only skills but stories and smiles. The diamond was a stage where the prisoners could momentarily shed the heavy mantle of defeat and reclaim a sliver of dignity and identity. Yet the journey from skepticism to genuine engagement was not without obstacles. Some prisoners resisted, clinging to bitterness and distrust. Others wrestled with the frustration of learning a new sport under the shadow of captivity. But the persistence of the game's advocates, both prisoner and guard, wore down these barriers. Slowly, the camp's population found itself united by a shared pursuit. The game's pace, sometimes slow and deliberate, other times sudden and explosive, mirrored the prisoners' own fluctuating emotions. There were moments of triumph when a well-hit ball soared through the sky, and moments of quiet disappointment when a catch was missed. These highs and lows became part of the camp's fabric, giving shape to days otherwise marked by waiting. In the evenings, the barracks hummed with talk of plays and strategies. Players debated the best way to throw a ball, to anticipate an opponent's move. The prisoners practiced their English phrases related to the game, laughing at their own mispronunciations and sharing tips. Baseball was becoming a shared language, a bridge over the chasm of war and captivity. The guards, too, found themselves drawn into this new world. Some, who had once viewed the prisoners with suspicion, now cheered loudly for their favorite players. Others took pride in teaching a skill and seeing progress in their pupils. The game fostered a sense of camaraderie rare in a place defined by separation and control. For the prisoners, the diamond was more than just a field. It was a place where identities could be reshaped. The label of the enemy faded with each catch, each swing, each stone base. They were no longer just prisoners but athletes, competitors, men striving for excellence in a game that demanded skill and heart. Beyond the physical act of playing, baseball offered psychological refuge. The focus required to track a ball or coordinate with teammates provided a break from the relentless worry about home, about the war's aftermath, and about their uncertain futures. In the game's moments, they found a fragile sense of freedom. This growing passion began to ripple through the camp. Even prisoners who did not play found themselves drawn to watch the games, to cheer, and to share in the collective experience. The sport became a common thread weaving together a fractured community, a symbol of hope and renewal amid the bleakness. As the weeks progressed, baseball's presence in the camp solidified. It was no longer a novelty but a vital part of life behind the wire. The men practiced with increasing skill and confidence, their bodies remembering movements that transcended language and culture. The game became a shared ritual, a source of pride and motivation. Baseball was teaching lessons beyond the field, lessons of patience, cooperation, respect, and resilience. In learning to play, the prisoners were also learning to see each other and their captors in new ways. The sport was breaking down invisible walls, creating connections that war had sought to erase. Though the future remained uncertain, the prisoners found in baseball a reason to hope. The game offered a glimpse of a world where differences could be set aside, where competition did not breed hatred but respect. It was a small revolution within the confines of the camp, a testament to the enduring power of human connection. In the midst of captivity, the prisoners discovered that baseball was more than just a game. It was a bridge, a balm, and a beacon. Through it, they glimpsed a path forward, one shaped not by conflict but by shared effort and understanding. The sport was becoming a quiet force of transformation, one pitch, one catch, and one swing at a time. The sun hung low over the camp as the prisoners gathered once again on the dusty field, their faces flushed with anticipation and newfound purpose. Baseball was no longer a mere pastime or curiosity. It had taken root, blossoming into something far greater. The makeshift teams that had formed in quiet corners of the barracks were now official, organized under the watchful eyes of both prisoners and guards. The simple games of learning and practicing had given way to structured competition, a league of sorts that breathed new life into the daily grind of captivity. Each team bore the names of towns and cities from home, borrowed or invented, symbols of identity reclaimed amid the uniformity of camp life. The players wore patched uniforms scavenged from old clothing or fashioned from whatever fabric they could find, their numbers handwritten on backs and sleeves. In this humble form, the teams staked their claim not just to the diamond but to a sense of self that war had attempted to erase. The formation of teams brought with it a surge of energy and camaraderie. Men who had once been strangers, or even rivals on distant battlefields, now stood side by side, united by a common goal. Practice sessions grew longer and more intense, the players pushing themselves to improve every catch, every pitch, every swing. The clatter of cleats on hard-packed earth and the sharp crack of bat-meeting ball echoed through the camp, punctuating the rhythm of days that might otherwise have slipped into dull oblivion. In the dugouts, groups huddled to discuss strategy and positions, their voices low but animated. Hierarchies that had once been rigidly defined by military rank softened in the face of shared enthusiasm for the game. Leadership emerged through skill and dedication rather than command, and respect was earned on the field rather than the battlefield. The prisoners found in baseball a new arena for pride and accomplishment, a place where they could forge identities beyond the shadow of defeat. The transformation was not only physical but deeply psychological. For many, the act of playing was an assertion of agency and dignity in a situation designed to strip them of both. The game demanded focus and discipline, qualities that resonated with soldiers accustomed to structure but yearning for meaning beyond orders and conflict. Through baseball, they reclaimed fragments of normalcy, moments where they could be men first and prisoners second. The bonds forged on the diamond extended beyond the players themselves. Spectators, both prisoners and guards, gathered to watch the games, their cheers and applause weaving a tapestry of connection. Rivalries sparked excitement but rarely bitterness, replaced instead by a shared appreciation for skill and effort. The contests became social events, punctuating the monotony of camp life with bursts of vitality and emotion. As the competition intensified, so too did the sense of purpose among the players. The desire to excel fueled late-night practices and impromptu drills, the men pushing past exhaustion and doubt. Achievements on the field translated into renewed self-respect, a tangible proof that they could still rise above their circumstances. Captives once defined by loss now wore the mantle of athletes, their efforts celebrated and admired. The game's strategic depth fascinated many. Players debated the merits of different pitches, the nuances of field positioning, and the timing of base steals. The complexity of baseball mirrored the complexity of their own lives, unpredictable yet governed by rules that, once understood, offered a framework for control and success. This intellectual engagement provided a welcome distraction from worries about the future and the distant turmoil of their homeland. Teamwork became the cornerstone of this new existence. The necessity of coordination and trust on the field fostered a spirit of unity that transcended previous divisions. Men learned to rely on one another, to anticipate each other's moves, and to share both triumph and failure. In these moments, the barriers of language and culture seemed to dissolve, replaced by a common language of effort and respect. The guards watched these developments with a mixture of surprise and approval. Some took on roles as coaches or referees, their involvement lending legitimacy to the league and reinforcing the fragile bonds forming between captor and captive. Their encouragement was not without purpose. Baseball served as a tool for maintaining order and morale, but it also revealed a genuine appreciation for the transformative power of the game. Within the camp's confines, the diamond became a sanctuary. The act of playing allowed prisoners to momentarily escape the harsh realities of captivity, to inhabit roles defined not by imprisonment but by skill and teamwork. The field was a place where past grievances could be set aside, where the simple joy of the game eclipsed the weight of history. This emerging culture of baseball also fostered a sense of friendly rivalry that invigorated the prisoners. Matches were eagerly anticipated, with teams devising tactics and plotting strategies to outmaneuver their opponents. The competition was fierce yet respectful, a microcosm of the discipline and honor that had once motivated them as soldiers, now redirected toward peaceful endeavor. The physical demands of the sport brought renewed vitality. Men who had languished in barracks found strength in practice, their bodies responding to the challenge with increasing agility and endurance. The camaraderie built through shared sweat and effort translated into improved morale, a crucial buffer against the despair that so often accompanied captivity. Off the field, the prisoners carried the lessons of teamwork and discipline into their daily routines. The structure imposed by baseball seeped into camp life, fostering cooperation in tasks and reducing tensions. The game's influence extended beyond the diamond, shaping attitudes and relationships in subtle but meaningful ways. For the younger prisoners, baseball was a beacon of hope and possibility. It offered a glimpse of a future that might include freedom and normalcy, a life where the simple pleasures of sport and friendship could be reclaimed. The older men, while more measured in their enthusiasm, recognized the value of the game in restoring pride and purpose. The league's matches became events around which the camp's social life revolved. Crowds gathered to watch, cheering for their teams with a fervor that transcended the bleakness of their surroundings. The shared excitement fostered a sense of community, a collective identity forged not in conflict but in celebration of skill and sportsmanship. In this crucible of competition and camaraderie, the prisoners discovered something profound, a way to redefine themselves. No longer merely defeated soldiers or captives, they became athletes and teammates, men who could command respect through effort and ability. This transformation was a quiet rebellion against the dehumanization of war and imprisonment. The Baseball League, born from curiosity and nurtured by determination, was shaping the prisoners' lives in ways that extended far beyond the field. It was cultivating resilience, discipline, and a renewed sense of self-worth. Through the game, They were reclaiming agency over their identities, sowing seeds of hope that would endure long after the fences came down. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the field, the players gathered for one last practice before the evening curfew. Their faces were flushed, their bodies tired but energized. In their eyes shone the quiet pride of men who had found purpose in a place designed to strip them of it. Baseball had given them more than a game. It had given them a reason to believe in themselves once more. The afternoon light lingered long over the camp's baseball diamond, casting elongated shadows that mirrored the deepening respect between players on both sides of the wire. What had begun as cautious participation had now blossomed into fierce competition, tempered by a growing sense of mutual admiration. The games were no longer mere distractions. They had become arenas where redemption was quietly forged through skill, sportsmanship, and shared humanity. The prisoners, once defined solely by their roles as defeated enemies, now stood as athletes in their own right. Their swings were measured, their catches sure, their strategy thoughtful. Guards and prisoners alike marveled at the transformation. Men who had entered the camp broken and uncertain were now confident, disciplined, and proud. The field had become a stage where they could rewrite their stories, away from the stigma of war and captivity. With every game played, the walls of mistrust eroded a little more. Players from both sides exchanged nods of approval after impressive plays, shared smiles in moments of levity, and engaged in friendly banter that transcended language barriers. The simple act of recognizing an opponent's skill became a profound gesture of respect, signaling a shift in perception that reached beyond the diamond. The intensity of the competition grew, fueled not by animosity but by a genuine desire to excel and to honor the game itself. The prisoners embraced the challenge with a discipline reminiscent of their military training, channeling years of hardship into focused effort. Meanwhile, the guards found themselves inspired by the resilience and determination displayed by the men they had once viewed as foes. Baseball became a symbol of redemption, a way for the prisoners to reclaim dignity in a world that had stripped it from them. The sport's emphasis on fairness and rule-bound competition resonated deeply, offering a framework where merit triumphed over prejudice. In this space, the prisoners could be judged not by their past allegiances but by their present character and ability. The daily rituals surrounding the games, practices, warm-ups, shared meals, fostered a sense of community that transcended captivity. The diamond was no longer just a place of play but a crucible where discipline, morale, and humanity were nurtured. Men who had once been enemies worked together, coached each other, and celebrated successes as a team. This camaraderie extended beyond the players to the wider camp population. Guards who had previously maintained strict distance now mingled more freely, their interactions with prisoners marked by genuine warmth and interest. Baseball had created a common ground, a language of respect and shared experience that softened the harsh divisions imposed by war. The game's structure, its innings, its outs, its rules, offered more than order. It provided hope. For the prisoners, mastering baseball was a metaphor for mastering their own futures, a step toward reclaiming control in a life otherwise governed by uncertainty. Each successful play was a small victory, a testament to resilience and the possibility of renewal. The sport also cultivated virtues that extended beyond the field. Patience, perseverance, teamwork, and respect became daily practices, shaping attitudes and behaviors within the camp. The lessons learned in baseball translated into improved relations, reduced conflicts, and a shared commitment to maintaining a semblance of dignity amid difficult circumstances. As the league matured, stories of remarkable plays and close games circulated with enthusiasm, becoming part of the camp's collective memory. Players who had once been invisible behind the label of a prisoner of war and now enjoyed recognition and admiration. The diamond was a place where identities were reconstructed, where men found purpose and pride in their abilities. The respect earned on the baseball field began to influence how prisoners viewed themselves. No longer simply captives, they were competitors, athletes, and individuals capable of excellence. This renewed self-perception was a quiet form of resistance against the dehumanization of imprisonment, a reclaiming of agency through sport. Similarly, the guards' attitudes evolved. Many came to see the prisoners less as enemies and more as fellow human beings, each with stories, hopes, and talents. The shared experience of baseball fostered empathy, breaking down stereotypes and fostering connections that transcended the roles each had been assigned by the war. In moments between innings, players exchanged words of encouragement, tips, and jokes, their voices mingling in a blend of German and English. These interactions, though simple, carried profound significance, signaling a shift from suspicion to understanding. Baseball had become a bridge between worlds once at war. The game's ability to cultivate respect was perhaps its greatest achievement. Where weapons and rhetoric had failed to unite, the sport succeeded. It offered a space where competition was honorable, where effort was recognized, and where mutual regard could flourish despite the circumstances. The prisoner's redemption through baseball was not just personal but collective. The league embodied a community striving for dignity and humanity in a place designed to strip these away. Through competition and respect, they forged a new identity, one anchored in perseverance and shared endeavor rather than defeat. This transformation was visible in countless small moments: a congratulatory handshake after a well-executed play, a guard offering a word of praise to a prisoner, teammates rallying to support one another after a loss. These acts wove a fabric of connection that softened the harshness of captivity. The diamond became a sanctuary where men could momentarily escape the labels imposed upon them, stepping into roles defined by merit and character. The sport cultivated discipline and morale, vital for enduring the trials of imprisonment. In the rhythm of the game, prisoners found a sense of normalcy and hope. As the sun dipped low and the final innings played out, the players carried with them more than just memories of the game. They bore the intangible rewards of respect earned and given, of dignity reclaimed, and of humanity restored. Baseball had become a beacon in the darkness of captivity, illuminating a path toward redemption that transcended the boundaries of war. When the day finally came for the prisoners to leave the camps, the diamond where they had played so many games was left behind like a faded postcard from another life. The trains that carried them away clattered over the rails, each mile taking them closer to home but farther from the place where baseball had quietly rewritten their stories. For many, the memories of those games, the crack of the bat, the cheers from makeshift stands, the camaraderie forged beneath a foreign sky, were more than mere nostalgia. They were lifelines that had sustained them through captivity. Back in Germany, the world they returned to was scarred and fragmented. Cities lay in rubble, families struggled to rebuild shattered lives, and the shadow of defeat hung heavily over the nation. The men who had once been prisoners found themselves caught between past and present, carrying the weight of war's devastation while clinging to the fragile hope that had been kindled on the baseball fields of America. The stories they told were often met with disbelief. How could they explain the strange, almost surreal experience of playing baseball in captivity? The sport seemed worlds away from the grim realities of battle and imprisonment, a curious anomaly amid hardship. Yet for those who had lived it, baseball was a symbol of survival and redemption, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Some former prisoners sought out the game in their post-war lives, drawn by the values it had taught them: teamwork, fairness, and perseverance. They found comfort in the familiar rhythm of the sport, a tangible connection to a time when hope had flickered in the darkest moments. For others, the lessons of baseball shaped their approaches to rebuilding families, careers, and communities, instilling a sense of discipline and cooperation that transcended the field. The legacy of baseball in captivity endured beyond the individual, seeping into broader narratives of reconciliation and cultural exchange. The game became a bridge linking former enemies, a reminder that even amid conflict, shared humanity could be found. Stories of the camps leagues circulated in post-war conversations, offering a glimpse of possibility in a world scarred by division. Letters exchanged between former prisoners and American guards testified to bonds formed through the sport, friendships that survived the years and the distances. These connections were fragile but profound, echoes of a time when competition gave way to respect and understanding. Baseball had been more than a game. It had been a bridge to healing. The experience also challenged preconceptions on both sides. Prisoners who had entered the camps with hostility toward Americans found their views softened by the kindness and fairness encountered on the diamond. Guards, too, reconsidered their judgments, recognizing the prisoners as individuals shaped by circumstance rather than enemies defined by ideology. In the years that followed, the men carried the imprint of baseball's impact into new arenas of life. Some became coaches, teaching the sport to younger generations, passing on the values that had sustained them. Others embraced the game as a metaphor for rebuilding, learning to play by new rules, to work together toward common goals, and to find joy in shared effort. The camp leagues, though transient, left a lasting mark. They were a unique chapter in the history of war and captivity, illustrating how even in confinement, the human desire for connection and dignity persisted. Baseball had provided not just distraction but transformation, offering a path from desolation to hope. For many former prisoners, the memories of the games remained vivid, a sanctuary amid chaos, a reminder that identity could be reclaimed through shared endeavor. The sport became a symbol of resilience, a quiet testament to the power of redemption and healing. As the years stretched on, these stories found their way into memoirs, interviews, and conversations, preserving the legacy of a time when baseball bridged divides and nurtured humanity. The men who had played on those fields carried with them a profound understanding of the world beyond borders and battles, reshaping their perceptions of prosperity, power, and peace. In the end, the experience of baseball behind barbed wire was more than survival. It was discovery. It revealed a world where competition could foster respect, where captivity could yield community, and where a simple game could illuminate the enduring strength of the human spirit. The legacy of those games lived on, not just in memories but in lives transformed, in relationships healed, and in a world slowly learning to rebuild beyond the shadows of war.